The network of lay hunters Winchester Moot in September 2015 began in front of Winchester Cathedral with a general talk by Gary Biltcliffe and Caroline Hoare, authors of the Spine of Albion, about the importance of Winchester as a spiritual and political centre. Of particular mention was that Winchester is on the Belinus line, the longest lay in Britain. It was noted also that Winchester Cathedral is also the longest cathedral in all of Europe. On a field trip in 1990, we visited the cathedral crypt and its two wells, the first of which marks a node of the Belinus and Elen currents.
So here is a wellspring of water, quite dangerous, not anything to fall into, though probably not quite as deep as you might think there.
Can you actually see the bottom?
You can, yes. There is rubble there, but that seems to be the bottom of it. But it seems to be quite an ancient well, and its position is significant because it's underneath the high altar, probably the most holy part of the cathedral, at least underneath where the high altar was before it was moved. It's now just a little bit forward, but it seems to be a significant point in the building of the cathedral. So there is this well here, and it seems to have dated from a very early time, probably because the stone round it is underneath this pillar, which is a Norman pillar, which would date it then maybe to an Anglo-Saxon time. The pillars down here, this one is Norman, so to several of the others, you'll see the typical Norman arches, no refinement, no groove vaulting or anything like that, just simple groove vaulting, cushioned capitals or basic table capitals on the pillars, very thick pillars, all indicative of Norman work. Yeah. Citizens of Winchester are reputed to have saved the bones of St. Swithin and hidden them in the Hoare. Nobody knows exactly where the tomb was. Slipped and fell, and her basket of eggs, which would represent her wealth, because she was bringing it to market, all shattered. And he blessed them, and they reconstituted so that they were. And if you look at the memorial above there, the metalwork has eggshells on it, and apples, and raindrops, of course, because it was supposed to be a time when they took he was buried outside, and when they put him into the Anglo-Saxon cathedral, then it rained all day. We must in protest. So it's July the 15th. July the 15th is St. Swithin's Day, and we still say, don't we? If it rains on July the 15th, we're in for 40 days rain. And it rained this year on July the 15th, so there we are. St. Swithin. Oh, supposed to be St. Swithin there. There is also a stone coffin. Now, stone coffins, of course. Oh, sorry, that's the one. There are two stone coffins down here, but maybe we should just go and have a look at this one. You see, rather a comfortable position to be. You had to be a very special person to have a stone coffin, which would protect your body after death. Not that you would know anything about it, of course, but it would protect your body. And there's a pillow there, a nice little sort of niche for his head to go. And one might have felt very comforted, really, by the prospect of being interred in a coffin like this. I could think of far worse endings like this. So a stone coffin either was made for a king or a saint or somebody rather special. And the supposition is that this is Swithin's coffin. We can tell architecturally that this is later, by the way, because you've got the ribboard and the stones decorated. It's not highly decorated, but it is much more so than the Norman work. That stone, which came across from the Isle of Wight from Hoare, as most of the stone from Winchester. Still, quite a lot of the new stone comes over from France. And there is a stonemason, there's a woman stonemason now, who's the chief stonemason. And they are constantly, of course, repairing the statues and the architecture, the decoration on the outside.
Is that the cane stone?
Cornstone. Well, some of it, I think it isn't cornstone, actually. It's a quarry fairly close to corn. I can't remember the name offhand.
That was one of the Normans used.
That's right, it was, yes. But most of the stone in the cathedral came from Hoare, the quarries there, which is the Isle of Wight, or Beer, which was a much softer stone, and that was used for the great screen. But it doesn't stand up to weathering and everything. Part of one of the oaks which was forming the raft on which the foundations of the retro choir were. I don't know whether you heard about the necessity to shore up the east end of the cathedral, which was subsiding very much at the beginning of this century, about 1900. Do you know the story? Well, it's not a story, it's fact.
About it, yeah.
Yes, about 1900, the Belinus chapter were very worried indeed, because blocks of masonry were falling down, walls were completely askew, pillars were haywire, etc., and the whole thing seemed to be crumbling. And so they called in a firm of architects who employed engineers, Francis Fox company, and they eventually, and it's cutting a very long story short, employed divers, because they went down below the crypt. They weren't in the crypt at that time, but they were down 40 feet down, and they had to put adits underneath the structure of the retro choir at the eastern end of the cathedral, which was of course underwater completely and dark. And the divers, two of them originally and then one for most of the time, wearing diving suits and diving helmets and so forth, worked for 6 years, bringing down, having passed down to them, sacks of cement which were slashed open, putting them in brick formation, so that the weight of the building above it should be stable. And one particular diver, William Walker, worked from 1906 to 1912 doing that. There's a statue to him at the end of the cathedral. He died of a flu epidemic in 1919 later on. But that was all beneath the crypt, and really is rather a remarkable tale. And since then, the fabric hasn't moved at all, which is rather wonderful. Yes, what I was going to say was, of course, that the reason why the retro choir began to crumble was that although the original foundation of the main mass of the building is on gravel, that bed of gravel dips down here towards the river, and this was peat. And when they originally, in the 1200s, when Bishop de Lucy started the retro choir, they put trees, logs, on the peat, so that there's a raft of logs, and this is a section from one of them. There's another one probably over here in this last case that William Walker unearthed at that time. But beneath those logs, which were pickled, if you like, and intact by the slightly, it wasn't all that acidic because it's chalky alkaline water, but they were preserved under the water in any case. Beneath that you've got the peat, and the weight of the building compressed the water out of the peat gave, so the water came up, and every time, of course, they went down, water gushed up very quickly, so that the whole thing is on a very shaky foundation indeed at this end.
Was the retro choir built after the rest of the body of the church?
Yes, I mean the dedication of the Norman church was 1093, between 1079 and 1093. And then the retro choir dates from about 1200.
So, I mean,
it was...
sensible thing would have put it all on the gravel, but...
That's right, they couldn't. So why the retro choir was built is conjecture, really, but anyhow.
On this moot, we then began a walk around Winchester, starting at the courthouse that the main lay goes through. Mention was made of a limping ghost that was seen by various people. Then to the church of St. Swithin. Around the corner, a legend said he wished to be buried outside with his beloved people, but instead he was entombed in the cathedral, causing it to rain. Then we walked down the street to the college built by Christopher Wren, to view a statue of St. Mary over the door, as if to bless those who enter. This could be connected with the female Ellen current. Further down the street we came to the bishop's home and office, where a previous bishop, Henri de Blois, the Wizard of Winchester, stored up many interesting relics of a talismanic nature. We stopped round the corner at a tributary of the River Itchen and looked towards St. Catherine's Hill, which falls precisely on the Belinus Lay and is a meeting point of other lays. On the field trip in 1990, we climbed St. Catherine's Hill and visited the labyrinth on the summit.
St. Catherine's Hill near Winchester. This hill was purchased in the 14th century by Bishop William of Wykeham, founder of Winchester College, as the recreation ground of the college. He was the first educator to devise a system of tuition which carried a pupil from boyhood to young manhood. He opened Winchester College in 1394 to ensure a supply of suitable students for New College, Oxford, which he founded earlier. He ordained by statute that twice daily his 70 black-gowned scholars should ascend the holy hill. Lord Selborne, in his quincentenary poem, thus alludes to one of the most cherished memories of old Wickhamists. 400 years and 50 their rolling course have sped, since the first serge-clad scholar to Wickham's feet was led, and still his 70 faithful boys, in these presumptuous days, learn the old truths, speak the old words, tread in the ancient ways. Still for their daily orisons resounds the matin chime, still linked in bands of brotherhood, St. Catherine's steep they climb.
The Maze on St. Catherine's Hill.
Dowsing is a very versatile tool. It can be used to detect the presence of general substances such as water or metal, and also more specific things like archaeological remains or even the bodies of murder victims. Going one step further, it can be used to find intangible energies such as those associated with lays and ancient sites. In this lay dowsing on St. Catherine's Hill, both dowsers seem to find a reaction at the same spot. Going even further, the process can even be used to determine abstract concepts, such as ages of things. The St. Catherine's Hill maze seemed to give a date of 1250. The view of Winchester Cathedral from St. Catherine's Hill. E.O. Gordon, in her book on prehistoric London, says the hill stands at about the same distance from the cathedral as Silbury does from Avebury, and that Winchester Cathedral was erected on the site of a circle is practically certain, she says, from the fact that several stones were at one time to be seen in the close. The late Dean Stevens pointed out one of them to her, near the King's Gate, a relic which she considered went far to confirm the tradition that the first minster was built on the site of a stone circle.
The inner sanctum at St. Catherine's Hill. Gary notes in his book The Spine of Albion that not only does the straight Spine of Albion alignment pass through St. Catherine's Hill, but the serpentine Belinus and Elen currents cross twice at the site, once at the inner sanctum mound within a clump, and also at the adjoining turf labyrinth. Between them there is a rectangular raised area, which he feels was the site of the chapel, which is said to have been on the hill, rather than the summit. This seems to have been the area where the two dowsers had a reaction on the St. Catherine's Hill field trip. The two currents seem to form a Vesica Piscis figure round the area, although when he first dowsed the area in 1994, they seemed to merge into one flow for a short distance. Then he learned that the hill was being used for dark occult practices, and after carrying out healing ceremonies with other healers, found they had changed to the present configuration. The St. Catherine's Hill field trip was before this. He also said the legend of the Winton dragon is also associated with this Iron Age hill. The dragon is a landscape figure that stretches 27 kilometres, 17 miles, from Old Winchester Hill to St. Catherine's Hill. St. Catherine's Hill represents the dragon's head and snout, and its tail coils round Old Winchester Hill. It seems appropriate that we have two node points of the great earth serpents of Belinus and Elen at the head of a landscape dragon overlooking the ancient capital of a lost kingdom. In his article in the 2015 issue of the Network of Lay Hunters newsletter, Gary says Earth mystery researchers and psychics describe the hill as a hub or wheel of telluric forces. Interestingly, St. Catherine's symbol is the wheel, thus the circular hill fort could be seen symbolically as a round table or spindle within the wheel of the heavens, or axis mundi. In fact, Druid lore describes the hill as a royal seat or a place of assembly, around which they administered spiritual nourishment to the surrounding lands and people. In the Spine of Albion he also describes another straight alignment going through the hill, aligned on the setting point of the star Deneb. This goes through the college chapel, the high altar of the cathedral, Hyde Gate, St. Bartholomew's Church, and a crossroads at Whitchurch. It then goes through the gap between Sidown Hill and Beacon Hill, through which the setting Deneb would have been visible. Deneb and its constellation Cygnus were evidently very important to ancient people. I recently came across a film on YouTube in which Andrew Collins shows that the three pyramids at Giza in Egypt, including the Great Pyramid, which have been theorized to represent the stars in Orion's belt, fit the stars in Cygnus much more precisely. If this is so, then Deneb is represented by a tomb of the birds, where Andrew discovered an entrance to an extensive cave system. Mummified birds were found in the tomb. Deneb and two other stars in Cygnus would also be seen to rise simultaneously over the three pyramids. The film is The Lost Caves of Giza and can be seen by searching for that title on YouTube. In the same issue of the newsletter, Brian Thurtle presents an isosceles triangle with a perpendicular, a form which occurs time and again on lays, of which the two base points are St. Catherine's Hill and Bury Hill, Andover. The apex is at Winklebury Camp, Basingstoke. We visited St.Lawrence Church on the main lay, where bishops are sent to quietly contemplate before being ordained. We noticed also the name Eclipse Inn, and I remembered Gary told of the death and possible ritual sacrifice of King William Rufus on the equinox. The highlight of the day seemed to be the visit to the Great Hall, with its stunning Arthurian-style round table. Gary and Caroline talked about the significance of the carefully chosen geometry of the building to effect a magical change in consciousness on those within it.